Welcome everybody again to the latest installment of App Developer Conversations. I'm Ian Sefferman of Mobile Dev HQ, here with Ryan Morrell of PlacePlay and Roby Ganguly of AppTentive. Welcome, guys. So we've been talking a little bit about sort of new iOS, interest in Android. It sort of brings up the perennial question that we always ask ourselves of how does HTML5 look? How does not even developing in a native world look? What should we be thinking about here? And most notably, I think that we saw recently Facebook move to native, and Mark Zuckerberg say that one of his biggest mistakes was betting on HTML5. Do you have any sort of insight into what HTML5 looks like in terms of adoption on the advertising side?
It's low.
Okay.
So, advertising dollars always follow eyeballs. And until there's eyeballs focused on HTML5 focused apps or the web, then it's just not going to get there. Okay. I feel like I've had HTML5 conversations hundreds of times, and it always leads to like the inevitable, well, until HTML5 can perform as well as native, it's just not going to work, right? So in terms of advertising, we're not supporting it. I don't see anybody else supporting it. Doesn't mean it might not get there at some point.
Right. And what do you think it takes to make it get there? What are the features it needs? Is it strictly performance?
I think it's, my personal opinion is performance. And the backup to that is I don't think it will ever get there, right? Because native will always be better. A really interesting example that I was just thinking about was the guys at Z2 Live have battle nations on iOS and iPad, and maybe Android at this point, I don't know. And instead of doing a web version for Facebook, they did a Mac version. Right? So that's an interesting little red flag to go, wait a second, why'd you do this on Mac? I don't know why they did, but my guess is because it performs way better. Right? Go play any Zynga game or any web game, there's always latency issues, and it's always frustrating. When you can put it on the App Store and get distribution, why wouldn't you do that?
Right.
Well, also, the benefit of going into the Mac App Store is you've got the same ecosystem of people with credit cards and a trained behavior around purchasing. So it turns out, because we have some Mac developers who use us as well, and it turns out that Mac software you can sell for a lot more. I mean, the price points are much higher, and so Z2 Live is making more money per copy sold or utilized the Mac version. But if you're going to HTML5, what's your monetization solution? Like, what are you using to take in-app purchases? Google Wallet? That doesn't seem like it's got adoption.
Yeah, I feel like app stores are actually a huge reason why HTML5 hasn't been adopted widely. There was a great quote a while ago by, I want to say somebody at AOL way back in the day, and the quote was that a platform provides two major things. One is distribution and one is monetization, right? And on the monetization, the App Store, even Android Market, Google Play at this point, and certainly Kindle App Store, the amount of credit cards that they have, the integration with carrier billing, buying stuff is easy, right? And so those guys have nailed it. If you think about a strict HTML5 solution, I don't know. The first one on distribution is there's hundreds of millions of people who are opening up the App Store every day, right? Really, really interesting, compelling use there as well. So it feels like those two things, along with the fact that performance sucks, is very hard for HTML5 to catch up.
Yeah, so even if you forget about performance for a second, one of the challenges that I see with HTML5 outside of native apps, right, so different than what Facebook is doing, is you're adding another layer, you're adding another barrier, right? So not only does someone have to have a hardware that is capable, they have to find the distribution mechanism to find this HTML5 app, and then they have to find your app, right?
That's right.
So that's another layer when people are already just used to going into the App Store. So my personal belief is that we should stop talking about it. not in this conversation, but it's like just in general. Until HTML5 will get there when it gets there, or it won't. End of story.
It sounds like because as you were talking about Amazon, that struck a chord because it sounds like the problem is that somebody needs actually pushing the HTML5 platform forward. Right? It seemed like Google was doing that, and maybe arguably they still are, but they've kind of pulled back. They seem kind of confused about this, but if it's not Google, who else would it be? And maybe it's Amazon. Maybe Amazon can actually say, okay, we've done a lot with the App Store on Kindle Fire, right? We've developed this whole our own version of Android, but we want iPhones to be able to purchase stuff from us as well. So here's our HTML5 App Store that's powered by our credit card solution. Like that could be interesting. That could make HTML5 relevant.
Yep.
But I think until somebody like either Amazon or Google is able to really meaningfully push this forward, we're not going to see it like organic adoption of it.
Yep.
But even in that case, that assumes that the performance is there, right?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is you look at all the big companies and they've all sort of gone through this progression. So it's Apple, right? Apple released the original iPhone and everybody was like, where's my SDK? And Steve Jobs is like, it's the web, right? Build apps on the web,
Totally.
right? And then he came out with the App Store. And then Facebook is like, HTML5 is the future. Now they're back on native, right? And Google was so big on HTML5, on doing all of their stuff in the mobile web, and now I really haven't heard anything on that front in a while.
Yeah. Well, it was Microsoft, Apple, Google, and Facebook were they're the four people essentially paying for HTML5 development.
Yep.
And they're also the ones kind of killing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they want to own their own ecosystem and content, and
Yep.
HTML5, there's some misaligned interests there.
Yeah, totally. Well, okay, so I think we all come to the conclusion that HTML5 should just chill out for a little bit. Like, let's get some.
Go lift some weights, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Find some credit cards.
Just
like a stack.
Join a CrossFit gym. Do some stealing of credit cards, like maybe something like that, and then let's get back and we'll talk again. All right. Well, great. Check out the other conversations.
So, how long do you think it is before you guys start to see some data about whether or not the changes affected search?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's probably going to be only a week or two before we start to get some initial data on